Megan returned home tired from a long day at work. She dropped her bag on the chair near the door and kicked off her shoes, happy to finally relax. But before she could even sit down, she heard her mother call her from the living room. There was something different in her voice, a nervous tone that made Megan pause for a moment. She walked slowly to the living room, not sure what to expect. When she entered, she saw her mother sitting on the couch, looking uneasy. Her brother, Daniel, was sitting next to her, his hands clasped together tightly, his face pale. The air in the room felt heavy, like something important was about to be said. Megan frowned and asked softly, "What's going on?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath, looked down at the floor, and finally said, "I need to tell you something." His voice shook a little. Megan's heart began to beat faster. She sat down across from him and waited. Daniel looked up and said the words that would change everything. "I used our house as collateral for a business loan." For a few seconds, Megan didn't move. She thought maybe she had heard him wrong. "What did you say?" she asked quietly. Daniel repeated it, slower this time. "I mortgaged the house for my new business." Megan blinked, trying to understand. Her eyes moved to the coffee table, where she noticed a few papers neatly stacked. They looked like bank documents. When she saw their family address printed on top, her stomach turned. Her hands began to tremble. "You did what?" she whispered. Her mother was silent, looking down, tears already forming in her eyes. Daniel tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "It's just for a while," he said quickly. "The business is going to do well, I promise. I just needed some funds to get started. Once it takes off, I'll pay the bank back and everything will be fine." Megan could barely believe what she was hearing. She looked at her mother, who only shook her head slowly. Her father had passed away a few years ago, and the house had been their biggest memory of him, his pride, his hard work, his gift to the family. And now Daniel had put it at risk. The room was silent for a long time. Megan didn't know what to say. She could hear the faint sound of a clock ticking on the wall. It was the only sound in the room. Daniel sat still, waiting for someone to say something, but Megan couldn't find her voice. Her thoughts were spinning. How could he make such a big decision without telling anyone? How could he take such a risk with something that didn't belong only to him? Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why, Daniel? Why would you do this without talking to us?" He looked at her, guilt flashing in his eyes. "I didn't want to worry you," he said. "I thought you'd try to stop me. I needed to act fast, this was my chance to build something of my own." Megan closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She understood that Daniel had dreams. He had always talked about starting a business, about being successful. But this was too much. "You risked our home," she said softly. "The one place we all belong." Daniel's shoulders dropped. He rubbed his hands together nervously. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to make things better for all of us." Megan wanted to believe him, but her heart ached. She remembered how many times they had sat on that very couch, laughing together, sharing meals, celebrating holidays. The house was more than a building, it was the heart of their family. Now, it felt like that heart had been broken. Her mother spoke at last, her voice shaky. "Daniel, your father worked his whole life for this house. He wanted it to stay with us, no matter what. How could you take that risk?" Daniel looked down, unable to meet her eyes. Megan could see the regret on his face, but it didn't ease the pain. She felt a wave of anger, sadness, and fear all at once. What if the business failed? What if they lost the house? Where would they go? She stood up slowly, pacing back and forth. Daniel watched her nervously. Megan didn't shout or scream. She didn't have the strength. Instead, she spoke quietly, her words heavy with emotion. "I hope you know what you've done, Daniel. I really hope you do." Daniel didn't answer. His lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. Megan turned away and walked to her room, closing the door behind her. She leaned against it, her heart racing. The house suddenly felt colder, quieter, almost unfamiliar. That night, Megan lay awake for hours. She kept thinking about the papers on the table, the look on her mother's face, and the fear in Daniel's eyes. Her mind kept asking the same question: what would happen if everything went wrong? She knew Daniel wasn't a bad person. He just made a terrible choice. But choices have consequences. As she stared at the ceiling, she realized that their family would never be the same again. The trust that had always been there was now cracked, and even if things got better, those cracks would always remain. Outside, the wind blew softly against the windows. The house stood still, carrying the weight of secrets, fear, and hope all at once. And in that quiet, Megan understood one thing: sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you the deepest, even when they don't mean to. The house was quiet the next morning. Megan sat at the kitchen table, staring at her untouched cup of coffee. Her mother was moving around the kitchen, pretending to be busy, but Megan could see that she was distracted. Daniel hadn't come down from his room yet, and the silence between them felt heavier than ever. Every time Megan thought about what had happened the night before, her chest tightened. The house, the one place that had always made her feel safe, was now at risk. She tried to push the thought away, but it kept coming back. The memory of Daniel's pale face and her mother's trembling hands wouldn't leave her mind. When Daniel finally walked into the kitchen, Megan looked up. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept at all. His hair was messy, his eyes red. He poured himself some coffee but didn't say a word. Megan wanted to speak, but she didn't know where to start. Her mother broke the silence first. "Daniel," she said softly, "have you thought about what you're going to do now?" Daniel sighed and leaned against the counter. "I'll make the business work," he said quietly. "I just need time." Megan clenched her hands under the table. His words sounded confident, but his voice didn't. She wanted to believe him, but there was something uncertain in the way he spoke. She took a deep breath and asked, "What if it doesn't work, Daniel? What happens to us then?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "It will work," he said. "It has to." Her mother closed her eyes and whispered a small prayer under her breath. Megan could feel the tension filling the room again. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. Every sound felt sharp, every second too long. Later that afternoon, Megan walked to the backyard to clear her head. The air was cool, and the old oak tree cast long shadows on the grass. She sat on the wooden bench her father had built years ago. It was worn now, but it still held memories of summer evenings when their family would sit together, laughing and talking. Those days felt far away. She thought about Daniel's business idea. He had mentioned it a few times before, but she never imagined he would risk so much for it. He was always the dreamer, the one who believed that success came to those who took chances. Megan admired that about him, but she also knew that dreams could fall apart easily. Her mother came outside and sat beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then her mother said quietly, "He's scared too, you know." Megan turned to look at her. "He should be. He put everything we have on the line." Her mother nodded slowly. "Yes. But he did it thinking he could help us, not hurt us." Megan looked down at her hands. She wanted to understand him. She wanted to forgive him. But the fear inside her wouldn't let go. She didn't know how to trust him again, not after this. As the sun began to set, Daniel came out to the backyard. He stood a few feet away, unsure whether to come closer. Megan looked at him, and for a moment, their eyes met. He looked lost, like a boy who had made a mistake too big to fix. "Megan," he said softly, "I didn't mean to make things this hard. I just thought I was doing something good for all of us." She didn't answer right away. Her mother placed a gentle hand on her arm, as if telling her to listen. Megan took a deep breath. "Daniel, I know you wanted to do the right thing," she said. "But you should have trusted us enough to talk about it first." He nodded slowly, guilt written all over his face. I know. I just didn't want to hear a no before I even tried. Megan sighed. Sometimes a no isn't the end of something. It's just a way to protect what we already have. Her words seemed to hit him deeply. He looked away, his shoulders tense. For a long time, none of them spoke. The sound of crickets filled the air as the sky turned orange and pink. That night, dinner was quiet. No one talked about the loan or the business. Megan could tell her mother was trying to keep things normal, but it wasn't working. Every laugh felt forced, every smile short-lived. They were a family living in the same house, but they were no longer at peace. When Megan went to bed, she lay awake again, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft creaks of the house. She wondered how long they could keep pretending everything was fine. The silence was unbearable, but so was the truth. In that stillness, Megan realized something. This wasn't just about money or a business deal. It was about trust, something that once broken, could take years to rebuild. And she wasn't sure if their family had that kind of time. The following days moved slowly for Megan. Every time she walked through the house, she felt something inside her ache. The walls, the photos, the smell of the old wooden furniture, everything reminded her of her father and all the years of love and hard work that had gone into keeping their home together. But now, all she could think about was how it could be taken away because of one decision. Daniel tried to act normal. He spent hours on the phone, talking about suppliers, marketing, and sales. He told their mother that his business was doing fine, but Megan could see the worry in his eyes. He was trying to be strong, but the fear of failure was there. Megan didn't say anything to him anymore. She didn't know what to say that wouldn't hurt. One evening, she sat in her room, holding a small photo album in her lap. It was full of memories, family trips, birthdays, the day they moved into the house. She ran her fingers over a picture of her father standing proudly in front of the porch. He had built that porch with his own hands. Megan could still remember the smell of fresh paint and the sound of his laughter. Tears filled her eyes. She thought about Daniel again. They had always been close growing up. He used to protect her from bullies at school. He taught her how to ride a bike and helped her with her math homework. She knew he had a good heart. But what he did now felt like a betrayal, not because of money, but because he had acted alone, without trust. Later that night, she heard her mother talking to someone in the kitchen. When she peeked through the doorway, she saw Daniel sitting at the table, his head in his hands. Her mother stood behind him, gently touching his shoulder. "Daniel," her mother said softly, "you've always been the one to take risks. Your father admired that about you. But this time, you went too far." Daniel lifted his head slowly. His eyes were red and tired. "I know, Mom," he said quietly. "I just thought I could make things better. I wanted to give you both something to be proud of." Her mother sighed. "We've always been proud of you, Daniel. But pride doesn't build a home. Love and honesty do." Megan stepped back before they could see her. She didn't want to interrupt. Hearing them talk only made her emotions stronger. She felt anger, sadness, and love all mixing together until she couldn't tell one from the other. She went back to her room and sat by the window, watching the moonlight fall over the backyard. The old oak tree swayed gently in the wind, and for a moment, she felt like her father was there, watching over them. But even that thought couldn't calm her heart. The next morning, Daniel knocked on her door. Megan hesitated but told him to come in. He looked nervous, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I made you one," he said quietly. Megan nodded and took it. "Thanks." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Daniel stared at the floor, tapping his fingers on the mug. "Finally," he said, "I know you're angry at me. You have every right to be. But I didn't mean to hurt you or Mom." Megan looked at him carefully. "Then why didn't you tell us?" she asked. "Why did you decide something so big without even talking to us?" Daniel sighed. "Because I was scared you'd say no. I've been trying for years to make my own way, and every time something didn't work, I felt like I was disappointing you." This time, I just wanted to prove I could do it. Megan frowned. By risking the only thing Dad left us? He looked down, ashamed. I know it sounds stupid now. I thought I was helping. She stared at him for a long time. The brother she once looked up to now seemed smaller, fragile. You didn't just take a risk, Daniel, she said softly. You took away our sense of safety. You made us live with fear. Daniel swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't realize how much it meant. I thought I was strong enough to handle it all. Megan shook her head. You don't have to handle everything alone. That's what family is for. But when you hide things like this, you take away our choice. Tears filled Daniel's eyes. I'm sorry, Meg. She nodded slowly. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix everything. It just reminds us that something's already broken. He left the room quietly after that. Megan sat still, holding her coffee, staring out the window again. The morning light was soft, but her heart felt heavy. She wished things could go back to how they were, simple, peaceful, safe. But she knew they couldn't. Something between them had changed. As the day went on, Megan helped her mother with chores, but the air in the house stayed tense. Every word felt measured, every look full of unspoken feelings. They were a family connected by love but separated by hurt. That night, as she lay in bed, Megan whispered softly to herself, Dad, I hope you're watching us. We need your strength right now. Her eyes filled with tears again. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing, the bond between her and Daniel had cracked, and only time would tell if it could ever be repaired. The tension in the house had been building for days, and by the end of the week, it finally reached its breaking point. Megan had tried to stay calm, to let things settle, but she couldn't keep her feelings buried any longer. Every time she looked at Daniel, she felt a mix of sadness and anger. He had changed things between them, and no one knew how to fix it. That evening, their mother tried to keep things normal by making dinner like usual. She cooked Daniel's favorite meal, hoping that maybe sharing food would bring some warmth back into the house. The smell of baked chicken and mashed potatoes filled the kitchen, but the mood at the table was cold. Megan sat across from Daniel, her fork untouched. Daniel avoided her eyes, pretending to focus on his plate. Their mother sat between them, glancing nervously from one to the other. The clinking of silverware was the only sound. Finally, Megan couldn't hold it in anymore. She put down her fork and said, We need to talk about this, Daniel. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it that made Daniel look up immediately. Meg, not now, he said quietly. Let's just eat. No, she said firmly. We've been pretending for days that everything's fine. It's not. You risked our home, Daniel. You risked Mom's safety. You risked everything Dad worked for. Their mother closed her eyes, her hands trembling. Megan, please. But Megan didn't stop. No, Mom. We can't keep avoiding this. He made a choice that affects all of us, and we're just supposed to sit here and act like nothing happened? Daniel pushed his plate away, frustration flashing in his eyes. I told you, I'm handling it. I didn't ask for your help because I didn't want to drag you into it. Megan's voice rose, her emotions breaking through. You didn't ask because you knew we'd say no. You didn't trust us enough to be honest. You took something that belongs to all of us and gambled it away. Daniel stood up suddenly, his chair scraping the floor. It's not a gamble, Megan. I've got it under control. Under control, she repeated bitterly. You think losing sleep and hiding bills from Mom is under control? You think risking our home for some business plan you barely tested is smart? Their mother finally stood up too, tears in her eyes. Stop it, both of you. Please. This fighting won't fix anything. Megan's chest was tight, her eyes burning. She looked at her mother, then back at Daniel. You don't get it, she said, her voice shaking. This isn't just about money, Daniel. This house is our life. It's where we grew up. It's where Dad's memory still lives. And you, her voice cracked, you put it all at risk because you wanted to prove something. Daniel froze, his anger fading. The words hit him like a blow. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and their mother's quiet sobs. Megan sat down again, wiping her eyes. I'm not saying I don't believe in you, she said softly. I just wish you believed in us too. We're supposed to be a family, not strangers making decisions alone. Daniel's shoulders dropped. His face softened, and he took a step closer. You're right, he said quietly. I messed up. I thought I was doing something good, but I didn't think about what it would cost. Their mother reached out and touched both their hands. We'll figure it out, she said, her voice trembling but gentle. We always do. But we can't keep tearing each other apart. Megan nodded, still emotional. Daniel sat back down slowly, his face full of regret. The dinner had gone cold, but something in the air had shifted. The truth was out, and even though it hurt, it was better than the silence that had been suffocating them. After dinner, Megan went to her room and closed the door. She leaned against it, taking a deep breath. For the first time in days, she felt lighter, even if only a little. The pain was still there, but at least they had spoken. At least Daniel finally understood what he had done. Outside, the night was calm. The soft wind rustled through the trees, and Megan stood by her window, looking out. The house stood quiet and still, holding their memories and their pain. It had always been their shelter, and she silently promised herself she would do everything she could to protect it, no matter what happened next. The next morning, the house felt heavier than ever. Megan woke up early, hoping a walk would clear her mind. The air outside was cool, and the streets were still quiet. She walked slowly past the park and the old corner store her family used to visit when she and Daniel were kids. Everything looked the same, but she didn't feel the same anymore. Something inside her had changed. She couldn't shake off the ache that had been growing in her chest. When she returned home, her mother was in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of toast and coffee filled the air, but even that couldn't make the house feel warm again. Daniel was sitting at the table, staring at his phone. His face looked tired, his eyes heavy. Megan could tell he hadn't slept much. Morning, she said softly. He looked up. Morning. Their mother tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I made breakfast, she said, trying to sound cheerful. No one ate much. Every word between them felt forced. Megan wanted to find the right thing to say, something that could make things better, but she didn't know what that was. After breakfast, Daniel got up and grabbed his jacket. I have a meeting with the bank, he said quietly. Megan looked up sharply. About the loan? He nodded. Yeah, they want to discuss some payment adjustments. Her heart sank. Adjustments? What kind? He hesitated. They said business progress is slower than expected, so they're reviewing my repayment plan. Megan's stomach twisted. Daniel, are you in trouble? He forced a small smile. No. I just need to convince them things are moving forward. Don't worry. But she did worry. She worried the whole day. Every time she tried to distract herself, her mind went back to Daniel. She couldn't forget the look in his eyes, a mix of fear and desperation he was trying hard to hide. Hours later, when he finally returned, his expression said everything. He looked defeated. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, and his shoulders slumped as he walked into the living room. Her mother stood up immediately. Daniel, what happened? He sighed and sat down on the couch. They're giving me a month, he said softly. If I can't make the next payment, they'll take legal steps. Megan felt her throat tighten. Legal steps? You mean? He nodded, his voice breaking. They could take the house. Her mother gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Megan froze. She couldn't breathe for a moment. Everything she feared was becoming real. Daniel, she whispered, how could you let it get this far? He shook his head, his eyes wet. I tried, Meg. I really did. The market's been slow, and I kept hoping things would turn around. I didn't want to tell you until I had something positive to share. Megan stared at him, her anger boiling beneath the pain. She stood up and walked to the window, trying to calm herself. The sunlight streaming in felt too bright, too harsh. You should have told us, she said finally. We could have helped. You shouldn't have carried this alone. I didn't want to disappoint you again, he said quietly. Megan turned to face him. Her voice trembled, but it was steady. You didn't disappoint me because you failed, Daniel. You disappointed me because you hid the truth. You thought silence would protect us, but all it did was make the fall harder. Her words hit him hard. He lowered his head, unable to look at her. Their mother sat beside him, holding his hand, crying silently. Megan wanted to be angry, to shout, but something inside her stopped her. Instead, she took a deep breath and said softly, I hope your dream was worth this pain. Daniel looked up, his voice barely audible. It wasn't. Not like this. The room went silent again. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound. Megan stood there, her heart breaking for her brother, for her mother, for herself. She didn't want to fight anymore. She just wanted things to be right again, even though she knew it wouldn't be that easy. After a long moment, she walked over and sat beside Daniel. She didn't say anything. She just placed her hand over his. He looked at her, surprised, then nodded slowly, tears slipping down his cheeks. That was the moment everything shifted. The anger that had filled the house began to fade, replaced by something quieter, sorrow, but also understanding. They were still a family, broken but together. That night, Megan sat on the porch alone. The stars were faint above her, and the cool breeze brushed against her skin. She thought about her father again, about how he used to say that family was the one thing you never give up on. Maybe this was what he meant. Maybe love wasn't about always agreeing, maybe it was about staying, even when it hurt. As she sat there in the dark, Megan realized that her few quiet words had done more than any argument ever could. They had brought silence, but also reflection. And sometimes, silence was the first step toward healing. The next few days were filled with silence and long stares. Megan tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to Daniel and the weight that hung over their home. Her mother moved through the house like a shadow, cleaning dishes that were already clean, cooking meals no one touched. The once lively home felt empty, as if laughter had packed its bags and left. One evening, Megan sat in her room, the dim lamp casting soft light across her desk. Bills were scattered everywhere: electricity, water, mortgage payments. She stared at them until the numbers began to blur. Her savings weren't much, but it was something. She thought about her father's words again, family is the one thing you never give up on. She made a decision. Megan stood up, grabbed her purse, and drove to Daniel's small office downtown. It was late, and the street was quiet. The windows of his shop were dark, except for the faint light coming from inside. She pushed open the door and found Daniel sitting at his desk, his head resting on his arms. He looked up, startled. Meg. What are you doing here? She walked closer and placed an envelope on the desk. It's some money. I know it's not enough to fix everything, but it's what I can give. Daniel stared at the envelope, then at her. Megan, no. I can't take that. It's your savings. She shook her head. It's our home, Daniel. If we lose it, I lose it too. We're in this together. His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he whispered, I don't deserve you. Megan smiled faintly. You're my brother. You made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you stop being family. He stood up, walked around the desk, and pulled her into a hug. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight of anger lift. They stood there quietly, holding on to each other as if afraid to let go. The next day, they met with the bank manager together. Megan sat beside Daniel as he explained his situation. His voice shook, but she could see how hard he was trying. When the manager frowned at the late payments, Megan stepped in. She spoke calmly, explaining how they were working on a repayment plan and that she would help with the initial balance. Her steady tone softened the manager's expression. After what felt like hours, the manager finally nodded. "I'll give you both another chance. But the payments must be made on time from now on." Relief washed over them. As they left the bank, Daniel turned to Megan. "I don't know how to thank you." She smiled softly. "Just make it worth it. That's all I need." They drove home together, the car quiet but peaceful. When they arrived, their mother was sitting on the porch, waiting anxiously. As soon as Daniel told her the news, she burst into tears of relief, hugging both of them tightly. That night, they had dinner together for the first time in what felt like forever. The food still tasted the same, but something had changed, the air felt lighter. Laughter found its way back into the room, hesitant at first, then stronger. Later, when Megan went to her room, she looked out the window at the night sky. The stars were brighter than before, or maybe she just hadn't noticed them in a while. She thought about everything that had happened, anger, fear, heartbreak, and realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about staying when it was hardest to stay. Daniel knocked on her door softly. "Hey," he said, leaning against the frame. "I just wanted to say thank you, again." Megan smiled. "You already did." He hesitated, then added, "I'll make it right. I promise." "I know you will," she said, and meant it. As he walked away, Megan sat on her bed, a quiet peace settling over her. The road ahead would still be hard, but for the first time, she believed they could make it. They had faced the breaking point, and chosen to stand together. The decision she made wasn't just about saving the house. It was about saving their family. The days following their meeting with the bank felt different. There was still worry, but there was also a quiet sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, Megan woke up feeling like the world hadn't completely fallen apart. The sun coming through her curtains seemed brighter, the sound of birds outside softer, almost hopeful. Daniel threw himself into his work. He started waking up early, fixing old mistakes, calling clients, and looking for new ways to grow his business. Megan could see how determined he was. Every night, he would come home exhausted but with a little spark in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Their mother also began to change. She smiled more, hummed while she cooked, and even teased Daniel again at dinner. It wasn't the same as before, but it was healing slowly, like a wound that finally started to close. One afternoon, Megan came home to find Daniel sitting on the porch, a pile of papers in his lap. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, I think things are turning around," he said. "I got a small contract today. It's not huge, but it's something." Megan smiled back. "That's great, Daniel." "Really?" He nodded, his eyes full of gratitude. "It's because of you, Meg. If you hadn't stood by me, I don't know where I'd be right now." She shook her head gently. "You're the one who decided to fight for it. I just reminded you that you still could." He laughed softly. "Still, I owe you more than I can say." That evening, they celebrated with a simple dinner. Their mother cooked Daniel's favorite dish, chicken and rice with herbs, and they ate together under the warm kitchen light. The laughter that filled the room felt real this time. Even the old family dog wagged its tail, sensing the peace that had returned to the house. After dinner, Megan sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the night settle outside. The world felt calm, but she knew they still had challenges ahead. Yet for the first time, she believed they could face them together. The next morning, Daniel handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. He smiled shyly. "Open it." Inside was a small check. "Daniel, what?" "It's the first repayment," he said quickly. "For the money you gave me. I told you I'd make it right." Megan looked at the check and then at him. Her eyes softened. "You didn't have to rush it." "I wanted to," he said. "It's not about the money. It's about showing you I mean what I said. She smiled and folded the check carefully. I'm proud of you. He grinned. You're starting to sound like Mom. They both laughed, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. Later that night, Megan sat on the porch, the stars glowing faintly above her. She thought about how close they had come to losing everything, not just the house, but each other. Now, as she listened to the soft sounds of the night, she realized that maybe losing almost everything had taught them what really mattered. Daniel stepped outside and joined her. You know, he said quietly, I used to think success was about money, about proving myself. But now, I think it's about something else. She looked at him. What's that? He smiled gently. Keeping the people who matter close. No business is worth losing that. Megan nodded, her heart full. You finally learned what Dad meant.
Yeah,
He said softly, looking up at the stars. I think I did. For the first time in a long while, they both felt at peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it didn't scare them anymore. Together, they had already faced the worst, and come out stronger. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to a steady rhythm. The fear that had once filled the house faded into the background, replaced by quiet determination. Megan noticed how Daniel carried himself differently now, more grounded, more aware of what truly mattered. He still faced challenges with his business, but he approached them with patience instead of panic. One Sunday morning, the family gathered on the porch. The sun was warm, and the gentle sound of birds filled the air. Their mother was knitting while Daniel fixed a loose chair leg. Megan sat beside her with a cup of tea, watching them with a small smile. For the first time in months, peace felt real again. Daniel looked up from his work and caught her watching. What's that smile for? He asked, a teasing grin on his face. Nothing, she said softly. Just, it's good to see you like this. He nodded. Feels good to be like this. He paused, then added, you know, I used to think asking for help was a weakness. But now I see it's what saved me. Megan nodded. Sometimes strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about knowing when you can't. Their mother looked up and said gently, your father would have been proud of both of you. The words carried warmth and a hint of sadness. Megan's heart tightened, but in a good way. She missed her father, but she felt him there in that moment, between their laughter, in the air that surrounded them. Later that day, Megan went into town to pick up a few groceries. As she walked past the bakery, she saw Daniel's company truck parked nearby with his logo freshly painted on the side. It wasn't fancy, but it looked solid, like a symbol of a new beginning. She smiled to herself, feeling a deep sense of pride. When she returned home, the house looked golden in the afternoon light. The same house that had once felt heavy with fear now stood as a reminder of resilience. She paused at the gate, taking it all in, the familiar porch, the sound of her mother humming, Daniel's laughter drifting from inside. That night, after dinner, the three of them sat together, sharing quiet stories about the past. They talked about childhood memories, their father's jokes, and all the small moments that made them a family. The tension that had once filled every corner of the house was gone, replaced by comfort and love. As the clock ticked softly, Megan leaned back in her chair and looked at her brother. He caught her gaze and smiled. No words were needed, they both understood. What they had gone through had changed them forever. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, Megan stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool, and the sky was filled with stars. She wrapped her arms around herself and breathed deeply, feeling the peace of the moment. She thought about how everything had started, the shock, the anger, the fear, and how it had all led to this quiet strength inside her. Sometimes, she realized, life tested you not to break you, but to show you what you were capable of enduring. As she stood there under the vast sky, a gentle smile crossed her face. She whispered to herself, we made it. Inside, the house glowed softly, a symbol of hope, of lessons learned, and of love that refused to give up. And with that thought, Megan turned to go inside, ready to face whatever came next, with strength, with grace, and with the unshakable bond of family.